So on October 7, I was with my 3 babies, my 4-year-old and my twins who are 2 years old, at my sister up in the north. And hearing the reports coming in, the frustration of understanding that, it went out of control, the atrocity and the horrific massacre and images and videos that were coming in through social media, because Hamas was actually live, putting it live on Facebook and through Instagram, and receiving that, the amount of horrified and frustration was so big. And for me, it was really frustrating because we weren't sure. There were missiles attack, rockets who were shot constantly. We didn't know whether it's going to start coming from the north or from within. And it's completely burnt like a deep scar. I think that what is painful the most is I was there 4 days later with a group of ambassadors to go and see through their own eyes, not through the media, what had happened there. And it broke my heart because my grandparents who survived the Holocaust, having promised to them that such atrocities like massive massacre of Jews in most of the horrifying ways would never happen again, and seeing how it did, this is something that I will carry with me for the rest of my life. And it had become my own personal mission to make sure that my children's future is secure and is safe, and that something like that will really never happen again.
You, if people look at your profile, you're someone that comes from lots of progressive causes, from environment to human rights. And now let me, after what you described, let me play devil's advocate, or what we used to mean by that phrase. Do you think that in its right to protect itself and self-defense, do you think that Israel exaggerated, and your friends, even your friends sometimes say that probably you should have reacted in a different way? Was there an excessive use of force in that reaction?
Absolutely not. The capability of Israel's are far-reaching. Israel is obviously, in a war, and a war is something ugly. There is nothing like a pretty war. And we have tried to do everything, but everything in our capability to avoid war. I wish it was still 6th of October last year. I wish, every single Israeli wished that. We didn't want that war. This war was forced on us. It was forced on us by extreme radical Islamist group from Hamas, from Tehran, the IRGC, from Hezbollah. And they're not just threatening a territorial area. They are the disabling force in the Middle East. And not just. They have cells here in Europe, in South and Central America, in North America, in Africa.
I mean, I understand, but now let's concentrate on the Gaza. Let's start, I'll touch the other points, but now Gaza. I mean, when you see Gaza, I know Gaza well, you know Gaza well, I believe. You see what is now, what is left of Gaza. How is it possible to repair the ruins, the lives destroyed? Besides the reaction you had to have, what is your future for Gaza?
Look, it's important for us to say, we didn't want this war, and a war is not a pretty thing.
I understand, but what about the future?
And Israel has made took extreme measures to try and avoid civilian casualty, like no other country and no other army had ever took the measure like Israel. And obviously there are casualties. But Hamas and Iran has forced us into this war. This is on their hands. Looking on the future, we need to think how we end a cycle of violence. And there's two aspects for that. The first one is the rise of, the radical Islamist forces and how we prevent that. And that's not just a threat to Israel. Look on what's happened in Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Iran, Yemen. If we stand as an international community strong against those radical forces, then we're far stronger in preventing such atrocities in happening not just in Israel, but all around the world, including the Middle East. And the other side of it is the Palestinians. And how do we break that cycle of violence? And I think that, looking on the roles of the Palestinian leadership, time after time, refusing to come into an agreement. I mean, look, Gaza was our experiment on trying to give the Palestinian an autonomy, a land, to build their own state, their own autonomy, their own life. They could build a Singapore or a Hong Kong out of this area. But instead, they decided to invest in terror, in weapons, in the destruction of the Jewish people of Israel, and not accepting the fundamental fact that we're not going anywhere. We know that they're not going anywhere, but we're not going anywhere either, and we have to live side by side.
Minister, you just used the word state. So it means that you believe that there can be a Palestinian state.
So Gaza,
you that used the word.
Gaza was our experiment of an autonomy to Palestinians. They didn't want an agreement. They didn't sign on anything. We pulled out all of our troops. We pulled out all of our citizens out of the Gaza Strip, completely evacuated from every single living Jew. We even took the dead and buried them in Israel, and they were given an autonomy. And that experience completely blew up in our faces. It ended up in the worst massacre that we have ever experienced, where elderlies were burnt, our girls were raped, our family members were kidnapped into Gaza. Would you repeat an experiment like that?
So what is the new experiment that you want to create in Gaza? I mean, how do you see the future politically in Gaza? Because when we look at, for instance, I know you're not from the same party, but when we look at Prime Minister Netanyahu, I mean, that's the question that he never answers. What is the political future for Gaza?
So I can tell you that in behind the scenes, they've been working on a solution for the day after in Gaza. Not just, but for the region. It was published that Ron Dermer, he went to a meeting just last week with President Trump. He's been in a few meetings in the Middle East as well, talking about it, trying to come into a solution that would be accepted on the international community and try to see what we can do on the day after, and trying to come into an agreement with Lebanon. It's obviously difficult, but we need to understand that at the core of it, it's about education. And as a parliament member, I was chairing the education committee in Israel. And I know that everything starts from education. And when we know that the Palestinians are receiving a radical Islamist education curriculum that teaches them hatred and violence, that school camps that are funded by UNRWA as well are Hamas summer camps where they teach them to shoot weapons and how to stab Jews, I think that our first answer to these issues has to be about the educations. And when we will have an education system that will teach peace and tolerance and coexistence, then maybe we'll be able to break that cycle of violence.
But so, I'm sorry to say, but what you're saying to me takes me all hope, because is there anyone that you can talk to in the Palestinian population, in the leaders, in the Palestinian Authority, in the government of Palestine, in the Prime Minister of Palestine? Who can you talk to? Because you are describing me like a situation where you cannot talk to anyone.
I understand, and this is part of our frustration as well. I mean, look on the Palestinian leadership. They couldn't even condemn the 7th of October. They couldn't even condemn Hamas. So it is very frustrating when you have a leadership that supports such atrocity and is incapable of condemning it. On the other hand, I have hope. And I have hope because, just a few years ago, we've signed the Abraham Accords with a few Arab countries in the Middle East.
May they rest in peace.
Well, it actually proved to be quite firm, these agreements, including the economical cooperation, including the diplomatic cooperation. And I think that one of the fundamental legs of these agreements was the education.
But isn't that a two-way street? I mean,
well,
don't you think that you also need to reform your education system in that? I know that in the Arab world there is the stereotype about Israel and the Jews. We understand that. But in Israel there is not also a certain stereotype about the Arabs and the Muslims.
You cannot make that comparison.
I'm not comparing. I'm asking you if you don't think that these stereotypes also exist in Israel.
No.
No?
Look.
I have friends of mine that have those stereotypes.
I can show you here. I have a booklet with me that shows the curriculum of the Palestinians. The Israeli curriculum, much of it teach about peace, about coexistence, about our neighbors. And it's important maybe to note, because maybe some of the viewers don't understand, but Israelis are not just Jews. There are Arab Israelis, Muslims and Christians and Druze and Bedouins, and we live in coexistence. Israel is this symbol of hope for the Middle East. No matter how complicated your community and how much variety you have in it, you can actually coexist and live side by side.
Yeah, but for instance, in that view, it's true that lots of Israelis are not Jewish. You have like Druzes, you have Christians, you have but so you believe that Israel is not a Jewish state, or it is?
Israel is a Jewish democratic state. It would be similar, if you take Italy. If Italy is a Catholic state, but a democratic state.
But it doesn't have a state religion.
I understand, but you can take examples from England or from many other countries around the world who actually adopt a certain religion as a state religion, but it is also a democracy. This is the only state culturally identified Jewish.
Most democracies don't have state religions. I'm sorry.
Well, I understand most, but it still exists. Like, for example, in England.
There is a Church of England, but people are not forced to belong to that church.
Well, no one is forced to go into a synagogue either in Israel.
Yeah, but you don't say the Christian state of England, right?
Look. That's not
a discussion.
But it is important, okay? The cross is part of the British flag. This is a religious symbol, okay? The UK has an official religion. It doesn't mean it's not a democracy. It gives its minority equal civilian rights in every aspect, same as Israel. But the declaration is a cultural declaration. It doesn't mean that they have less rights, okay? They have equal rights to anyone. Look on the Druze community. Some of the Druze community and the younger generation, many of them joined the IDF and the military. They serve side by side. Many Bedouin Muslim citizens as well. They understand what Israel means, that Israel is an isle of liberty in a Middle East where it's very unstable and very dangerous to many of their communities.
Minister, you are now number 2 defining the foreign policy of Israel. And so you have a special responsibility to explain me 2 or 3 things that I would like to see. First, what did you exactly destroy in Iran when you responded to the attacks that Iran did against Israel?
So we've targeted many military points, okay? Meaning some of their air defense systems.
So you destroyed the S-300s and the other missiles? Are you sure that you destroyed everything?
Look, I didn't say we've destroyed everything, but I say that we've targeted many military points. And that was our main goal.
And also production of missiles?
Yes.
Yes. And so do you believe that you infliged a potential deadly blow to Iran that will make Iran not to be a threat anymore, or you don't think so?
Look, Iran is the hardcore problem of, I will say, democracy and nations who love liberties. Iran is the biggest threat on the world's stability. Israel's just a little devil. America's the big devil, and the way that they view the cultural aspect of Europe is a threat to them. You just need to listen to the leadership in Iran to understand that they want to establish an Islamic world dominancy led by them.
When I traveled to Iran the last time, I visited the park of Niavaran, where there is a house that used to be the Israeli embassy to Tehran. Now the first floor is occupied by the Palestinian Authority and the second one by Hamas. What do you think it's needed for Israel to have again an embassy in Tehran?
Look, I think that the biggest force in fighting the IRGC are the Iranian people themselves. They have felt on their own skin what it means to be oppressed, stepped on, murdered, raped by their government. The bonds between the Iranian people and the Israeli people is extremely strong. It's extraordinary because we understand what it means to lose freedom, what it means to our family, to our children. And so I believe that the biggest force there is the Iranian people who are trying, and they are trying, and there are so many incredibly brave women who are leading the fight against Iran, against the IRGC, not Iran. Great women, brave women who led it and paid a tearful and hurtful price. And I think that, you know, if we were to ever talk about it, it would be the day after the greatest Iranian revolution to topple the most murderous, violent, and monstrous regime that has murdered so many people and tortured so many people, not just in Iran, not just in the Middle East, but all around the world.
You said an interesting thing. You said, okay, the main problem is the Islamic Revolutionary Guard. So do you envisage an Iran that still has the same political system, but without the Guard, as a possible new ally of Israel, or new friend of Israel, or new normalized state with Israel?
Of course. I mean, if there would be a democracy in Iran, you know, the friendship and the bonds between Israelis and Iranians is so strong. I'm still in touch with refugees from Iran. Matter of fact, just last month, Iranian refugee parliament member from Canada visited in the parliament, and a few other refugees who are persecuted by the Iranian regime. I hosted them in the Isle of Democracy of the Middle East, in our parliament in Jerusalem, where just a few weeks before, Iran's missiles were lighting the skies of Jerusalem. And it was so emotional. We hugged and we talked and we could feel each other. We really understand what's at stake. And so if that ever to happen, I know how strong our relationships and our friendship is going to be.